Okay, MOA students and anybody else that is quarantined or working from home, here is our battle plan for Wednesday, December the 9th of 2020. Our learning target says I could summarize the domestic policy of James Madison and analyze two Supreme Court cases. So click over on the classwork tab, open up your slideshow, and open up your digital interactive notebook. On the digital interactive notebook, we're going to begin on page 9. And we're going to be looking for a picture of James Monroe, his years in office, 1875 to 1825. And then we're going to define something called the era of good feeling. So when you open up the slideshow, we want to jump to slide 39. So again, once I've got the slideshow open, I go here. So it says the era of good feelings, a period of national unity and optimism after the War of 1812. So go ahead and pause the video and you're going to add that to this box right here. Go for it. Okay, so this era of national unity and pride isn't going to last for a long time. We're going to wind up with an economic disaster in 1819. We're also going to wind up getting some big political changes. The Federalist Party is going to come to an end. But drama over the bank is going to split the Democratic-Republican Party into two new parties, the Democrats and the Whigs. You thought I was going to say Republican. The Republicans don't show up yet. That's not going to be for another 30 years. But we are going to get the Democrats, yes, the same Democrat Party we know today, and this other party called the Whigs. So if you look at your questions from today so far, we've just done 3 of them. What is the time period after the War of 1812? It's the era of good feelings. Did the Federalist Party still exist by the end of Monroe's term? No, it didn't. The Democratic-Republican Party splits into 2 new parties. What are they? The Democrats and the Whigs. Okay, so you've now got the picture of the years in office, the era of good feelings. That's all we're doing on page 9 today. Friday we'll finish it. Tomorrow you're doing IXL. Friday we'll do the rest of this, okay? So let's go on to page 10. We already did Marbury v. Madison. By the way, you should have this whole thing done except for what we're finishing on pages 9 and 10. If you don't have it done, back up and get it done. It's due Friday. I'm grading it. Okay, so we did Marbury v. Madison the other day. We have 2 new Supreme Court cases to deal with, Mccullough v. Maryland and Gibbon v. Ogden. So you're going to need these notes. I'll put them on the screen in a minute, but before I give you notes, let's watch a couple of videos to help us with this, starting with Mccullough v. Maryland.
Can you or your state government tax the federal government? At the founding of our nation, this question was in hot dispute. And the 1819 Supreme Court case of Mccullough versus Maryland would help answer it. This case was the result of the founders grappling with the concept of federalism. What is federalism, you ask? Well, it's the idea that the federal government and state government share power. And when those powers are not clearly defined, it can cause disputes. Hence, the case of Mccullough versus Maryland. But to understand this case, we need to take a quick look at the history on the Bank of the United States. The creation of a national bank was one of the hottest issues at the founding of our country. Alexander Hamilton was pitted against Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. It was the founding father rivalry of the century. Hamilton supported the founding of a national bank for the purpose of controlling the nation's finances. Jefferson, on the other hand, opposed a national bank because he thought there was no authority in the Constitution to create one. Round 1 would go to Hamilton, as Congress chartered the first national bank in Philadelphia in 1791. The fight, however, was far from over. 20 years later, in 1811, Jefferson saw a victory as President James Madison and Congress refused to renew the bank's charter and let it die. This takes us to 1816, and the Supreme Court case, Mccullough versus Maryland. That year, a second national bank was created when President James Madison signed the bank back into law to deal with the debts America gained from the War of 1812. This thrust the issue of a national bank back into the center of the ring. This time, the bank set up shop in Maryland. In a strategic move, an attempt to exert control over the national bank, Jefferson's party, the Democratic-Republican Party, which controlled the state of Maryland, decided to tax the national bank as it resided within its borders. Now, federal bank cashier James Mccullough refused to pay this tax. He didn't believe the states had the power to tax the national bank. Conversely, Maryland argued that it had the right to tax any business in their state. This brought into question whether the establishment of a national bank was constitutional in the first place. So, the important issue of balancing federal and state powers, or the principle of federalism, was taken to the Supreme Court. The court decided unanimously that Congress did have the authority to create a national bank. Chief Justice John Marshall, in writing the opinion for the court, highlighted that under the necessary and proper clause, Congress has the right to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers. In other words, at the time, the court felt it was constitutional because the powers of the bank were related to several powers in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. The court also ruled that the state of Maryland could not tax the national government. This decision was made citing the Supremacy Clause in the Constitution, which makes federal law superior to state law. Marshall wrote, "The power to tax involves the power to destroy." Therefore, the federal government had the upper hand under the Supremacy Clause, which made a bank, constitutionally created under the Necessary and Proper Clause, superior to state authority. This case further defined federalism within the United States, as the federal government gained more power from the court's decision. This case is important to understand, as our nation still faces many issues that deal with federalism and the Necessary and Proper Clause. These include healthcare, the legalization of marijuana, the Second Amendment, immigration, and LGBT issues. For more information on this,
Okay, so there you go. So your notes on this one should look like, where'd our notes go? Okay, should look like this right here. All right, so you're going to be again on page 10, and you need, here's the name of the case, you need the year, the main issue, and the ruling. And here's that. 1819, state of Maryland wanted to tax the national bank, and the significance implied powers are constitutional, and states cannot tax federal agencies, which, by the way, can the federal or national government regulate? Well, that's different. The bottom question, can a state tax an office run by the federal government? The answer to that bottom one is no. So go ahead and pause the video and get these Mccullough v. Maryland notes real quick. Okay, now that you've done that, let's do Gibbon v. Ogden. And actually, this one, we're going to skip the video because it really doesn't matter. But you're going to need these notes down here at the bottom, and here they are again. You had these two guys that both owned riverboats. They were competing. It's on the Hudson River, which goes between New York and New Jersey, meaning it's interstate. It's between two states. The state of New York gave one guy the license to run the business. The other guy had a license from the federal government. So who wins? Well, the court says that because the river runs between two states, the federal government is the one that gets to regulate that. So this last question on here, can the federal or national government regulate business that runs across state lines? The answer there is yes. Okay, so you want to get these notes into that interactive notebook. That is the big takeaway there, that if Whataburger wants to run a store in Carlsbad, New Mexico, instead of just stores in Texas, they're now an interstate business. They cross state lines. Therefore, they are subject to federal regulation. The national government can regulate any business that happens across state lines. This is a big deal because in 2020, that's almost every business. Almost every business has some dealings out of state, meaning that the federal government in the modern age gets to regulate almost all of the economy because of the Interstate Commerce Clause in the Constitution, as interpreted by the Supreme Court in Gibbon v. Ogden. So you're going to need to pause the video, make sure you have all these Supreme Court notes on page 10 of your digital interactive notebook, and once you've done that, you are done for the day. Tomorrow I'll be putting up an IXL assignment. Have a great day, guys.